That's okay.
Not that it would matter now.
Yeah.
You're a free man. On the planning club. He was great.
Carol,
Not.
you ready to go?
We'll play it.
Here you go.
What choice do you have?
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me in the back? Thank you. Just a minute to let people get settled. Thank you. Nice crowd today. Glad you could make it. I'm John Stride, president of the City Club of Portland. We're excited to welcome you to our first City Club Friday Forum event of 2026. Here we go. And we have a good one for you today. Please take just a moment to silence your cell phones. Okay? Better? Okay. Take a moment to silence your cell phones. We're delighted to be joined today by the recently retired city administrator for the city of Portland, Michael Jordan, and the City Hall reporter for Willamette Week, Sophie Peel. Please welcome them. Our two guests will discuss the events at the city from the perspective of the administrator, who, until a week ago, oversaw the day-to-day operations of all bureaus and was responsible for leading the transition from the prior form of government to its new structure. No easy job. And we extend our warm welcomes to CJ, Mike's wife. Thank you for joining us. Before we begin, just a word about City Club. Our mission is to educate and inform our members and the community about matters of public interest and to provide space for civic dialogue that encourages respectful discussion and positive change. We accomplish this by producing nonpartisan public forums and debates and conducting policy research that result in a written report with recommendations to policymakers. City Club members provide the ideas, lead our conversations, conduct our research, and plan our programs that address issues important to our community. Member dues and donations make it possible for City Club to offer programs such as this free to the public. Everyone is welcome at City Club. We have a wonderful and lively lineup of programs scheduled for the next few months. On Monday, January 26th, please join us at 6 p.m. at Alberta Rose Theater for a legislative short session preview. The Oregon Legislature short session is set to start on February 26th. I think it'll be a spicy one. Join us to hear from the panel of experienced political reporters, including Carlos Fuentes with the Oregonian, Dirk Vanderhart with OPB, and Dick Hughes, recently retired from the Oregon Capital Insider, as they unpack the big issues shaping the policy this year. They will discuss the budget deficit, proposed legislative bills, and key anticipated policy topics. Probably transportation in there somewhere. The conversation will be moderated by former House Majority Leader Jennifer Williamson. Then on Friday, February 6th, join us back here at noon for the first of two health care programs. The first program will feature former Governor John Kitzhaber, along with Bruce Goldberg, former Executive Director of the Oregon Health Authority, discussing the economic crisis in healthcare and related policy solutions. The second part is scheduled here in March, on March 6th, and will focus on putting those policies into practice. Later in February and March, we'll host all 12 Portland City Councilors at venues in their respective districts to hear how things are going so far this year and how our new form of government is shaping up. You won't want to miss that. Today's moderator, Sophie Peel, has agreed to moderate all four of those programs. That's courageous, Sophie. Thank you. And finally, on Friday, April 10th, here at noon, join us for a lively discussion on the state of our state and the local economy with Oregon State economist Carl Recadonna and Jeff Renfro, Multnomah County economist. We offer special thanks to Carol Samuels and Bobby Reagan, City Club Program Committee members, and also the producers of today's program. Thank you. And to Kayla Kennett, our communications director, for her work in organizing this. We also thank the University Place for hosting this program. Finally, let's take a moment to thank our sponsors who allow us to present these programs: AARP Oregon and the Don Sterling Fund at the Oregon Community Foundation. Please help me show appreciation for them. Now to today's program. Michael Jordan served as the inaugural Portland City Administrator and was instrumental in helping the City of Portland transition to a new form of government. Previously, he served as the Chief Administrative Officer and as Director of the Bureau of Environmental Services at the city. Before joining the city, he served at the highest level of both state and local governments, including as the Chief Operating Officer of the state and Director of Oregon Department of Administrative Services, and as an elected Clackamas County Commissioner, and as the City Administrator for the City of Canby. Mike retired from his role as the City Administrator just 1 week ago. I hope it's going well so far. Moderating our discussion is Sophie Peel, an investigative reporter with the Willamette Week since 2021. Sophie currently focuses on City Hall and Portland neighborhoods. She also covered state politics, including reporting in 2023 that led to the resignation of a former Oregon Secretary of State, and that led to statutes that curb loopholes around campaign donations. Sophie previously worked at NPR in Georgia. Following the discussion today, we'll have an opportunity for questions from the audience, so please be thinking of those. To ensure that we get as many as possible, please prepare to ask a question within 30 seconds and make sure it has a question mark at the end. And now, Mike and Sophie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, John, and thank you, everyone, for being here. Can everyone hear me okay in the back? Okay. It sounds a little fuzzy where I'm at. Okay. Mike, thanks for being here. First, I'm hoping you could just very briefly talk about what led the city to this new form of government. So just briefly, in maybe 1 minute or less, tell us about the charter reform measure that voters passed in November 2022 that led us here.
Okay, so the last form of government started in 1913, and Portlanders, I believe, had voted 8 times prior to change the charter, and they had all gone down significantly in defeat. But this time, things were different in November of 22. Folks may remember that every 10 years, Portland, by charter, must form a charter committee. That charter committee is made up of 20 members appointed by City Council. But once they are appointed, they do their work completely independently of City Council. And this charter committee that was formed in 2020 took about 18 months, did extensive research across the globe in all different forms of government, and put together a proposal for voters to change the form of government in Portland. And in November 22, it passed 58+%, I believe, voting in favor. So that's what got us to getting ready for a new form of government starting in late 22. The editorial comment is, so why did voters vote for this change? It is not one you just pull off the shelf at ICMA as a council manager form of government, or going to many large cities that have strong mayor forms. Those are kind of the norm, off-the-shelf choices for a change in governmental structure, but not Portland. And as I said, the commission did a lot of research on different issues. They had a set of values they were trying to hit as they formed the new government. Much of that had to do with accessibility. for more members of the folks in Portland, to have a more diverse city council that brought a more diverse set of thoughts and backgrounds and ideologies to the discussion, and particularly wanted to make sure there was more representation from areas of Portland that had not traditionally had much representation on city council. I think for those things, they did an amazing job. We have broad representation from across the city. We have certainly the most diverse city council from the standpoint of their ideology and their thinking and their purpose about government than we've ever had, which is both a blessing and a curse. But I think it's safe to say that this is really a custom-made form of government for what the commission thought Portland needed at the time. It wasn't just to pull it off the shelf and let's move to this other form. So that's how we got here. And that was more than a minute, sorry.
It's just around 2. I was timing. Just kidding. So 2023 hits, and former Mayor Ted Wheeler asks you, maybe begs you, to come back to the city and figure out how, over the next 24 months, to transition our form of government, as it currently was in the commission style, to a completely new form of government that no one's ever really done before. What was his ask of you, and what did you see your charge being at the beginning of 2023 up until 2025?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Not to be contrary, but the mayor came to me in May of 22 and asked if I would take this city, the chief administrative officer role that existed in the old form of government. And I told him, no, thank you very much. I was very happy running the utility, what I affectionately called the shit show in Portland. I found out that wasn't the only shit show in Portland when I got into the other job. But I told him that what would be interesting to me, I was near the end of my career. I was actually scheduled to retire at the end of 22. And I said, what would keep me around would be, if the voters approve this in November, I think it would be one of the most interesting and challenging things you could ever do, is to try and make this change work. And so that's what I told him. That's why I took the job. It passed in November. And I know there's a lot of discussion about ranked choice voting, and a lot of discussion about a 12-member council, all those division of branches. But we had a lot of really technical things that had to get done, and they had to be done on time, and they had to be done right. Aside from all of the political issues that came with the new form, there were just a whole slew of technical issues. We had to change our whole election code. And oh, by the way, the election wasn't until November. The code had to be done by April of 23, so that Multnomah County, who administered the election, had enough time to change all their software, run the whole fail-safe systems to make sure it would work. So there were just a number of things. We had to form districts, which we'd never had before. They had to be constitutionally correct, equal members of voters, and all the rest of the things that had to be done literally by August of 23. All of those kind of more technical things had to get done so you could actually run an election in November of 24. So there's a lot to do. The one thing that the measure did not require the city to do, and that was to restructure its administrative organization. However, I believed that the aspect of the charter change that was one of the most important was to bring professional management to the city. The mayor, whoever that mayor was going to be in November of 24, the first thing they would have to do is appoint a city administrator. And that person basically was in charge of running the day-to-day operation of the city. I was hoping we would attract really stellar, top-tier candidates to that job when we went out for it, probably in early 25. And I knew that, we post that job in early 25, and the first thing a candidate who thinks they might want the job would do is go to the city's website and start poking around. And they would instantly realize that if we hadn't changed anything, we had 26 offices and bureaus that would report directly to this person. In the old form, they reported to 5 different commissioners. And I think even if the person was willing to apply, they would know that the first thing they would have to do when they came is reorganize the city. And at least in my experience, no one does that big a restructuring of this big an organization with this many interests and this many labor unions and survives. You usually get executed after about 2 years. You've pissed off enough people that you no longer can be effective in the job. And so I thought, well, you're leaving anyway, why don't you do it? And so we started in 23 to restructure the city government. It's not rocket science. You can look around the country. You will find most cities are organized around things they do for people in an urban environment. They do public works and infrastructure. They do public safety. They do community and economic development. There's somebody that kind of is the clerk of the works that keeps the place running. So it's not a novel organizational structure, but it is one that I thought at least a person could look at it and say, I feel comfortable having the authority over this, and I feel comfortable being held accountable for it. We had to get that done by November of 23, and the old city council had to approve it. That's the other trick, is you're trying to prepare for a new form of government while the old form of government is still running the place. They graciously approved the structure, thank God, because we had to go right into a budget process to budget for the new structure, because midway through that fiscal year, we had to hand the keys off to new mayor and new council with a budget that would match the new organizational structure. So it was, let's just say it was complicated.
So, I think, like you said, a big reason why voters wanted to scrap the old form of government is because they felt like city services were not being delivered as swiftly or as efficiently as they should be. And, I think your charge in large part was to get services faster and better to Portlanders. At this point, we're a year into the new form of government. And with all the operational changes that you and the city have made, do you think Portlanders today are better served just in the very, basic sense of basic city services than they were a year ago or 3 years ago?
I think they are, at you say, a very basic level. We don't really do many really sexy things. When you turn on the tap, you expect it to be clean and plenty of it. When you flush, you expect it to go away and get treated well so it doesn't harm the environment. When you dial 911, you expect somebody to show up in a reasonable amount of time. You expect a park to be somewhere in fairly close proximity to your home. You expect that park to be relatively clean, and functional. And when you want to go someplace in the city, you expect there to be multiple options to get there that have a fairly predictable and safe way to move about. That's about it, okay? Yeah, we do some economic development. Yeah, we do public involvement. Yes, we do a lot of things to do all those things well. But that's about it. And I would tell you that this new administrative structure, with a single person accountable for the operation, that has trickled down into the organization where we have a clearer view of who's making decisions and who's held accountable for those decisions. We have now a structure where someone can encourage, force is too hard a word, but encourage bureaus to work together on multidisciplinary problems. And, oh, by the way, those are the only ones we have that matter. We've pretty much solved all the things that a single bureau can do by itself, and they do okay. When it comes to multiple bureaus that have to develop a multifaceted solution to a complex problem that, quite frankly, is about all we face in a big urban environment anymore, we struggle with that. I think we're getting better. I think that clear line of authority has helped already. I was seeing it before the new council showed up. You may remember Mayor Wheeler asked that we start practicing the new form back in July of '24 under a new budget, and the mayor took all the bureaus back and asked me to kind of start working like it would, or at least we hope it would, in '25. And I was already, by the end of '24, seeing the administration begin to change. So it's a long process. You don't change culture by drawing boxes and lines on a chart. It takes time. It's about human behavior. But I'm seeing improvements already at the administrative level, at the line staff level. The interface between the administration and the policy and political world is another discussion.
We'll get into that. But let's keep it a little bit simple for now. Well, not simple, but less simple than politics. I think there's a lot of Change is hard for a 6,000 person organization. I'm curious how much resistance you felt from the changes you made over the past 2 or 3 years. And I've heard really different accounts about this. I've heard that, a lot of longtime bureaucrats in the city, including bureau directors, really wanted to sort of keep their fiefdoms going. They were comfortable with how they ran things, and they liked sort of there are also probably benefits to being siloed too. You sort of have your own operation. So, and then I've heard, another account of everyone was really welcoming the change. So I'm curious where you sort of land on that spectrum.
Well, neither is true. And
very diplomatic.
You certainly are, and that's why I love you. So there's a rule of thumb when you do this in big organizations particularly, but it's kind of true in every organization, because we're all human, and we all are creatures of ritual and habit and culture. And so when you go to do this, about a third of people will say, "Where have you been all my life?" A third of the people will go, "Huh?" And a third will fight you till they die. Now, the percentages can be different, but you get the idea. And so, yes, I think the answer to your question is yes. There were people who've been waiting for these kinds of changes to work in an organization that could be more collaborative, that could be more responsive, that cycle times would be not excruciatingly long. And then there are people who have become very comfortable in the bureau form. You're right about them being kind of, it was a feudal kingdom where bureau directors were kind of like princes and princesses, and they had big, huge walls with moats with alligators in them around their bureau. And so collaboration was sometimes hard. Again, I think that's breaking down, but the answer to your question is there were all flavors of folks there. I think we did a decent job of engaging employees. I will say that the first change we did back in November 23 was just a huge framework. I would bet that 80 to 90% of employees almost didn't know it happened, and their life did not change much. Police still did their job, the public works maintenance people still went out and did their job, and so, they didn't really see it. I will tell you, this year, we went through a whole nother level of change deeper in the organization. And I will guarantee you, employees are much more engaged in that discussion because it involves what they do every day and doing it differently. And that's a much more difficult thing when you're talking about moving 7,000 people's dog dish and not just a few folks at the bureau director level.
At a really kind of big picture level, it's even been unclear to me as a journalist who's supposed to be reporting on these things, whether, this whole government reshuffle, realignment has expanded the organization or shrunk the organization, or neither, if it's just kind of whirled everything around and put it neatly where it's supposed to be, it sounds like. Did we get bigger? Did we get smaller? Did we stay the same size?
That's a great question, particularly from a kind of change management perspective. When we did the reframing of the organization to get ready for a city administrator back in 23, I was very explicit from the very beginning of that this was not a force reduction exercise. We did not get bigger. I can guarantee you that, because we cut budgets and laid people off even in that budget year. So we were starting to see the front end of the challenge that's coming for the city clear back in the spring of 22. So we could see that coming. But it was not a force reduction exercise. When we started working on this year's budget last fall, that they are now getting seriously into, and did what we call a realignment exercise with internal services, I was very explicit from the beginning of that it was a force reduction exercise. We took 7 internal services: engagement, equity, communications, HR, IT, procurement, and budget and finance, all internal services. Engagement, equity, and communications have an external thing also. But I told them at the beginning of that realignment exercise, clear last spring, that I expected 20% cuts. Now, that didn't all have to be people, but the target for restructuring those was 20%. 5 years ago, if I had said, I need 20% out of, let's just say, HR, they would have simply watered down HR by 20%. They'd have delivered the cut, but we would have just been doing it the same way we were doing it before, but 20% less. This exercise, I asked for 20%, but I also demanded that they restructure the delivery system of these services. So another example, HR has about 85 people in the HR department. When the analysis was done of people doing HR work in bureaus, almost exactly the same number. So we were closer to 150 to 175 people doing HR work across the whole organization. So when I said 20%, it was of the bigger number, not of the 85 in HR, but also asking to redesign the delivery system so it could be more effective and more efficient. So I'll stop there. That's what we were trying to do.
So I want to get into the relationship between the administration and the new city council. So, start of...
I have to go. No.
Me too, actually. We have to go to the same place. We have a new mayor. We have 12 new city councilors. We have you, the city administrator. And I remember you and I had a conversation actually at the tail end of 2024 where you said the thing you need to pay attention to this year is the gray area about separation of powers, because at some point it will be a power struggle between the council and the executive branch and the administrative branch, because the charter that we adopted left a whole lot of gray area in terms of who gets to do what in this city. And so you guys are kind of making it up as you go, and it hasn't always been pretty. It's created a lot of tension between the council and sometimes the mayor, but also the administration. You've said this to me, the administration was really kind of put in a position of the city council came in, they had a mandate from voters that the old form of government wasn't working, city hall wasn't working, we have to redo the whole thing. And so they came in with sort of a suspicion, I think, almost about the administration and the people in it. And you guys have sort of been fighting that from the beginning of last year. So I'm curious how it has been for you navigating that. Well, now you're done. Godspeed. How was it last year navigating that? And did you foresee it getting so sour sometimes as it did?
I was so smart back in 24, wasn't I? I didn't foresee how challenging it would be. I knew it was going to be challenging. And I've said it a lot, and you know, the charter's got like 3 or 4 paragraphs worth of language that tells you what the legislative branch is supposed to do, what the mayor's supposed to do, and what the city administrator is supposed to do. And basically you put, I'll say 14 people, including the administrator, put 14 people in a dark room and said, run the city. And what a surprise, we bumped into each other a lot. And sometimes when we bumped into each other, it didn't feel very good. And most of the time when we bumped into each other, it didn't look very good. And we're still bumping into each other. And you've asked me this question in maybe a different way before. You're right about this city council coming in thinking, I believe, and understandably so, that voters said, we don't like what's going on, get in there and change it, fix it. And these roles that have been defined in the charter have been defined a certain way for a good reason. But the space between the roles has shown to be very hard to navigate. And I will just say, with 20/20 hindsight for my own culpability in this, is that I didn't establish quickly enough with council and with the mayor that the administration is a different animal. We are not the minions of the mayor. And I think that impression was laid down fairly early in lots of people's minds, and it has lent itself to a schism between council and the administration that is a very difficult thing to overcome. And they will overcome it. They will get through this. But I think for me, if I had foreseen that earlier, and I had been more adept at explaining both to the mayor and to council that what our role was as the administration, I think that would have helped. It wouldn't have solved everything, for sure. I think this backdrop of having to fix everything was a challenge. I think the mayor, who I will say I have yet to ever see in my 41 years an elected official more focused on what he wanted to accomplish, laser-like is an understatement. And I think occasionally to the detriment of other issues. And one of the issues was his relationship with the council, and him and I, in my role, being clearer about articulating the purpose of the roles and what we were trying to fulfill. So I think there's no one answer that said, how did we get here? But I think there's, the old saying, there's plenty of blame to go around. However, I will say the last 4 months or so of my year with the electeds, I thought we were getting a lot better at being able to articulate what the administration was there to do and how we were there to support both the executive and the legislative branches. The one thing we didn't do very well, and the council is still struggling with, is just rules of the road. I mean, many of you in this room have had exposure to the state legislature. And the state legislature, while I will grant at times looks like a free-for-all, has very definite and long-standing cultural norms and written rules about how legislation gets formed. You don't get anything done without Ledge Council writing it up for you, you know. You just can't go anywhere if you don't follow the rules. And we don't have those rules established, and we certainly haven't had it become part of the cultural DNA of the organization. As that happens, we will get a lot better at what we're doing. It just hasn't matured yet to that point.
I'm curious, you know, I think I've heard sort of two schools of thought about the chaos right now between, you know, the council and the administration and the mayor, and also just interpersonally with the council. One is that this is a good thing. This is democracy. We're working out the kinks. And actually, it's good that, you know, we're airing this public discourse in this Discord, right? Like this is the messy work of democracy. And then I hear other Portlanders saying it's hard to take this city seriously when all they're doing is arguing. This is child's play. They're not addressing the real issues. And those viewpoints, I don't think, could be further from one another. How do you view it?
I think I said it earlier. This is the most diverse city council Portland has ever had. And they have come to their job with some ideas about how they think it could be better. And those ideas are not in alignment. And not only are they not in alignment at a certain level of work, let's just say, what I like to say, the daily getting the beer out, they're not necessarily in alignment, but they're also not in alignment in a vertical way. We have a certain element of the council who feel very strongly that it is city council's job to comment on national and world events. And I think they all believe that to varying degrees. But some, it's a high priority for them. I think some Portlanders believe that's important. They want their city council to stand up to an oppressive federal government that seems to be occupying their city. And that's fair. They also have to show Portlanders that they can get the beer out. That every day they're working to make sure the water is clean, the environment is taken care of, the public safety is there, you know, the parks, etc. So you got to do both. And I think Councilor Green was just recently quoted somewhere as saying we got to walk and chew gum at the same time. And he's right. They need to do some of both. They seem to, however, have gravitated towards an agenda that is more inclined to be focused on the federal occupation of Portland than it is on the daily getting the beer out. I will say I've never seen anything like what this city has gone through, literally in the last 5 years. But particularly, this council has been thrown a curveball that nobody was ready for. And so, I've said this before, I think while there are legitimate things to be concerned about and to be critical of, you also have to understand that no city council before this one has had to face this issue in this way. So
you're a free man now. You can't get fired, and you didn't sign an NDA. What's only by your wife? What's your honest appraisal of this council?
All right, now we're getting to it, aren't we, Sophie? You know, I think given the structure that they are trying to do their work within, given that there is no history, and they are coming to the job in a unique situation in Portland's history, I think they're doing okay. I wish, you know, there is something about local government that you can't escape. And that is, no matter how much you disagree with your colleagues on a particular issue, if you're willing to burn the house down for that issue, you're going to have a real problem coming back and working the next day. And I'm not sure all of the members of our council have internalized that. And if I was to give advice, that would be it. It would be, you cannot escape each other. And to expand on that theme, the council cannot escape the mayor or the administration, and it goes for all the players. Politics at the local level is a team sport, and we're all on the same team. We all want the same thing.
I think we might need to have an intervention with this council where you tell them that. Because on Wednesday, as many of you probably know, the council tried to elect a president for this year. They spent 8 hours in a 6-6 deadlock, and it got increasingly mean. So I think that wisdom is probably more important now than ever, and I hope they listen to that.
No, go ahead.
Similarly, I want to ask you, kind of, again, sort of a similar question about Mayor Keith Wilson. So, like you said, he spent the better part of, well, all of last year standing up 1,500 shelter beds. He was laser focused on that during his campaign. That's what he ran on. He got elected on that promise largely, and he did it. He said it was going to solve unsheltered homelessness. I think everyone can agree that that does not end unsheltered homelessness. But I do think a lot of people agree that we did need more shelter beds in some capacity. We spent a lot of money on standing up those shelter beds last year. And I'm curious, from where you sit, do you think that was a responsible use of money? And do you think it would be a responsible use of money to do it all again next year?
Little bit of context before I answer for Mayor Wilson. We're spending somewhere around $75 million a year ish on services that didn't exist 5 years ago in the city's budget. That's approaching 10% of the general fund. And we stood up those services predominantly using one-time federal money, CARES money, AARP money, some state money, some metro money. But most all of it for the shelter system is one time. It will disappear on June 30. Mayor Wilson is, I would say, not only laser-like focused, but he has proven himself to be one of the best fundraisers I have ever seen in local government. And we would not have 1,500 beds had he not went out and sold the hell out of it to the governor, to Metro, to anybody who would listen, and he did. The $64 million question is, can he do it again? And so we go into this budget for the next year, and when you add it all up, and there are a whole bunch of other holes that, not just shelter holes. So for instance, there's about $25 million of one-time money in fire and police supporting overtime. There's one-time money in the parks budget. There's one-time money doing camp removals. There's, when you add it all up, it's well north of $100 million. That does not account for the roll-up costs when you do a current service level budget on what we're doing today. So if you just took everything that's in the budget today and rolled it up to what it would cost next year, then you start to get well north of $100 million in the general fund. And so it's going to be a huge challenge. The other little fly in the ointment is this whole shelter system that has been built has not entirely been built by the city of Portland. Multnomah County is the other major partner with lots of funds coming from Metro, the SHS measure. The SHS predictions for revenue are lower next year than they already are lower this year than last year. So the county is coming to the table around shelter and the services associated with shelter with a constrained budget. So the city will come with the constraints I mentioned, the county will come with a constrained budget, and I think there will need to be a very hard conversation about what parts of the shelter system are the most efficient and effective, and they are very different. The different parts of the shelter system are much more expensive than some other parts. The analysis is being done as we speak about how effective each one is at moving people from the street to housing. And you have to remember, if we're not moving people through this system, we're just warehousing folks. And that's not what anybody wants. And so it requires services, not just the bed. It requires money to subsidize housing on the back end. And it requires services of outreach to get people from the street, even into shelter. And all of those parts have to work together for the whole thing to be effective. And so is it going to be really hard? I think it's going to be really hard. I think you will see a diminished shelter system as far as just numbers of beds. I think it's going to have to be a more nuanced combination of types of shelter for the whole system to be as effective as it can be.
After a year of operations, do you think this council's form, as it was laid out in the charter, so 12 members across 4 voting districts elected by ranked choice voting, do you think it makes sense?
You know, the last 48 hours of evidence to the contrary, maybe. Like maybe an odd number would be a good idea. So, yeah. I do think districts are a good idea for Portland. I think representation, particularly from the east and southeast parts of the city, has been lacking for decades. So I think districting makes a lot of sense. I think we're going to have to go through multiple election cycles to know if multi-member ranked choice voting is effective over the long term. And guess what? We have a self-made breaker in the charter. So in 2030, whoever is on city council will have to appoint another charter commission to examine the city's charter. I bet you know what the number one item they'll look at will be when they come together. It will be this system. And, you know, I'm not really a betting man, but I will tell you, if it has not found its way, if it's not settled in, if it doesn't feel like governing is happening in a fairly predictable and expeditious way, the Charter Commission will likely take a look at the whole thing and say, you know, maybe one of those off-the-shelf things is better than the custom-built model. I don't know that, but if it settles in, and it looks like, you know, they've found their sea legs, things are working, the work is getting done, looks like they've figured out how to get along with each other, then I think you could see a charter commission come in and say, you know, maybe the mayor ought to be on council, or maybe the mayor ought to have a veto. Maybe, I don't know if multi-member will even get into the discussion. It really depends on how effective is it. If people perceive, okay, rough start, they found their way, looks like it's working today, maybe a tweak or two, but not wholesale change. But if it's not better than it is now, you could be looking at them looking at the very foundational parts of it.
For the parts of this new form of government that haven't worked so far, do you attribute that to sort of an inherent flaw in the structure, or do you attribute it to the people who are stewarding this thing?
You know,
And that's not a yes or no question.
no, it's not. It's not. None of us do what we do independently in a vacuum, devoid of system influence. None of us. We are all creatures of the systems that we live our life in, whether it's ranked choice voting, multi-member districts, or it's, hell, we've got 23 other cities in this region, and they all have council manager forms. Are they better than Portland? Are they worse than Portland? If you looked at the 23, you'd find some that you'd say, hell, they're a lot better than Portland. And I guarantee you, you'd find a handful or two and you'd say, they're really worse than Portland. So I'm not sure it's either the people or the system. It's how they work within it. And to be fair, again, the system is brand new. I'm not sure any of them walked into the job with this neat little chart of how they were going to act within this system. And I would guarantee if you asked all of them, and you probably will, is it different today than you thought it would be when you walked in the door? And I would say all of them would say, yes, it's very different than I thought when I came in. And so it tells me that they're still adjusting, and it isn't one or the other. It's how they work together. It's how the human beings act within a system. I'll close this question with, regardless of the system, there is a fundamental civility that must come with working in a group. You know, an elected executive mayor, quite frankly, for one term gets to do any goddamn thing they want. And they will pay at the polls when they come up for re-election as to whether they did it well or did it badly. In a group of 12 that have to do their job with each other all the time, it's election day every day. And it is predominantly judged, I would say, by most people observing. It is as much judged by how they treat each other as it is what the legislation that they put out the door.
I get the sense that you're not impressed by how they're treating each other. Is that a fair assessment?
You asked me this question once before, and I'll answer it somewhat the same way. It is fascinating to me, it was fascinating to me, sitting through council meetings. I sat through nearly every one in the last year. Fascinating to me to watch an individual start a sentence and sound absolutely brilliant, and in the next sentence spew vitriol that you wouldn't talk to your worst enemy about. And in the next sentence, be smart again. And so, is it any one of them? No. Is it, there's a balance on how they manage themselves vis-a-vis their cohort. And I think that's something that needs the balance between being smart and being collaborative. That equation needs to be rebalanced.
Last question before we go to audience questions. I'm curious if there was a moment last year in your role as a city administrator that during which you felt pride or joy or excitement, whether it was, you know, a small thing or a big thing or something behind the scenes or something that happened publicly. Was there a moment that really stands out to you where you thought, like, this is awesome?
Actually, lots of moments in under one theme. And when Mayor Wheeler asked that we, start practicing back in July of 24, we had a set of new folks put into roles in the organization, actually appointed by the the former commissioners. I didn't get to appoint those folks. And so I had a group of deputy city administrators to help figure out how we were going to make this new structure run. And I think the most joy and the most, go back to your office alone and sit in the chair and smile, was watching people grow. I will be honest, I've said this so many times. The last 5 years, the city of Portland, the hardest 5 years in my 41 years of public life, no question, hands down, easy answer. From COVID to civil unrest to homelessness to a federal intervention to a downtown economy that was broken, the hits just kept coming. And to watch people step into these roles and mature into them and grow and become leaders, it is the most gratifying thing that there is in this work, is to get people build an environment where people can grow and become their best self. And I watched it happen over and over again in the last year, and it was wonderful.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, we have about 15 minutes for audience questions. So if you have a question, I think how we're going to do it, and please tell me, Bobby, are you going to take the mic to people? Okay, Bobby is the mic deliverer. Okay, ignore me. Line up on the left. Please try to keep the preamble to your question less than 20 seconds. As John said, your question must have a question mark at the end.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and giving your I'm sorry, I'm Erica Stewart. Is it on? Is it on?
It's on.
Okay, Erica Stewart, not currently a member, but I did take the QR code. I will do that. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit about accountability for the budget in each one of these bureaus, because there seems to be a lot of confusion. I'm a member of the Northwest District Association Planning Committee, and we have a really hard time getting a window into these budgets, what's actually been allocated, where it's been spent, and what are the metrics or measures of success.
Good question, and as you would expect from the city of Portland, an uneven answer. We are not over bureau land yet. There are still vestiges of great independence in the way bureaus put their budgets together and the way they account for how they spend their monies. And I can tell you one of the more frustrating things in the jobs I've held with the city was being able to ask what I thought was a very coherent question about how we spent our money, and literally it taking months to get an answer. Because of the way we account for things, because of the way the budget is structured. It is very difficult to get a citywide, or in many cases even a bureau-wide, accountability on a particular question of where are we spending all the money on sponsorships? Pretty simple question. We write little checks to different people to help them, the nonprofits of the world. I tried for 8 years at BES to get an answer, never got one. And so it's just very challenging. Now, that doesn't excuse us from being accountable for how we budget. And I think you will find going into this budget process that there will be a report that comes out mid-February from the city budget office that will have that current service level budget that I was mentioning for every bureau, and it will have a revenue forecast, and it will show a significant gap, right? That will kick off a conversation, one with the council amongst themselves at a policy level, one with the technicians in bureaus about how we're going to close this gap, but a third with the public about how do we go about closing this gap and what are the most important things in it. And so I hope that folks will find an opportunity to engage. And then the issue of accountability is that at some point, I shouldn't put this on the new city administrator, but at some point, at the end of the day, he's accountable for this and accountable for a level of transparency that bureaus have to be able to show people about how we're spending their money. I think that question is going to become excruciating in the next, not year. We're going to be in this for 3 to 5. This is a long, deep trough. This is not a blip. We have a structural problem in Oregon and certainly one in Portland about how we are going to supply public services and pay for them. And that dialogue should be very transparent. It should engage the public because you all are going to have to live with some very hard decisions. We will not be doing everything we're doing in 5 years. We just can't be. We have to reset the bar. That will be very, very hard.
And Mike, that was an amazing answer, and I'm going to ask you also to be a little shorter because I want to see if we can get to as many folks as we can.
May I, please? Debbie Kay, City Club member, thank you for your work. I welcome you and hope you will have a fulfilling retirement. I ask, will you be able to, empowered to, or welcome to be engaged with your successor?
Thank you. Already am. Raymond Lee, in case you have not heard the name, is the new city administrator of the city of Portland. He started on the 29th of December. So we had officially 1 week that we overlapped, but I'm available to him at his discretion at any time. The last thing you want, people say, well, why didn't we have a longer overlap period? A lot of answers to that just logistically, but I can tell you the last thing you want, and as his new city administrator, is the old guy rattling around in the hallways of your government, with everybody going to them and saying, why can't we do this? But I am at his beck and call for as long as he ever wants me.
Sam Metz, a card-carrying member of the City Club. Portland went to a great deal of trouble to have a more diverse and more numerous city council. Did anything that the city council did or say during their council meetings have the slightest effect on your daily life as an administrator running a city?
Wow, there's a deep question. The answer is absolutely yes. I said something earlier about none of us being able to do our work in the vacuum away from the system that we do it within. And the dialogue at the dais filters into the organization. I think I said this once before. I think it was to you, Sophie. Staff watch what's going on like a hawk. Even if it doesn't really affect their daily life, they watch it very closely. And when it's very unsettled at the leadership level on council, people don't get mad, they get scared. And when people get scared, particularly in big organizations, they just disappear. It isn't that they go do bad things. It isn't that they get angry. It isn't that they act malevolently. You just can't find them. And when we respond that way, we as an administration respond that way, we begin to play the game on our heels. And when you play this game on your heels, problems that were manageable if you'd gotten to them when they were way out there, by the time they're on you, they're huge, and they're much more difficult to deal with than if you'd have gone out and got them in advance. But when you play the game on your heels, everything is on you, and it just makes the whole game tougher.
Hi, Joe Gardner, City Club member. One of the criticisms that we hear a lot about the charter has to do with democratic accountability. Specifically, most of this is electoral. A councilor sort of has 11 other people to blame when the voters come up, and even in their own district, they have 2 other people to blame. But I've heard similar criticisms about the city administrator role, simply that there's an unelected official who's sort of separated from the mayor and from the council. What do you see as the ways in which the administrator should deal with that, about democratic accountability, and also what people as voters, how they should be able to distinguish between whether they like something the council is doing or don't like something the council is doing versus the mayor versus the administrator? You said the administrator is accountable, but we don't elect them, so.
Sure. I appreciate the question. The way this government is structured, the city administrator is not just accountable to the mayor unilaterally. City administrator is accountable to a 9-vote majority of council without the mayor. So I've never worked in a system where I felt more accountability than I did in this system. And then I think if you want to get a more objective, perhaps, view of how city managers and city administrators view their accountability, you can call ICMA and you will find out that the average lifespan of a city manager in the United States is about 3.5 years. And so I think those people in those roles, while not elected, I'll grant you that, are maybe the most accountable people in all of local government, and get held accountable more often and, quite frankly, on occasion, unfairly. When the team's not playing well, you fire the coach, and that happens fairly often. And so I think there's a significant amount of accountability for the administrator, even though they're not elected. I really don't know how to answer the question of the electoral accountability and how that might affect the administration. I'll have to noodle that one. It's a good question, though.
Danelle Stevens, City Club member. Well, one thing I'll say is most cities have city administrators, and they help make things work. But my question is more of a, why are the water bills so high?
That's a great question. So really quick history. About 20 years ago, there was a near revolt in this city over utility bills. And there was a move to take the utilities away from the city, make them independent, failed at the polls. There was a lawsuit that went on for 5 years about misspending utility money. So there's a huge amount of scrutiny in history, and the reason utility bills were going up so fast then was this little project called Big Pipe. And we were spending about $1.5 billion, which was real money back then, on Big Pipe. And the Environmental Services Bureau, before I got there, was raising rates at about 6 or 7, maybe even 8 on occasion % per year. And that was just BES, not water. And at exactly the same time, they were cutting the operational budget at BES. The capital project was sucking every dollar out of that bureau, and they couldn't keep up. They had to raise rates. And the Water Bureau, bless their hearts, is going to go right into the same situation over the next decade with the filtration plant. And it will be $4+ billion before they're done, I guarantee you. And the amount of debt that will need to be issued and paid back will put the Water Bureau in exactly the same place Environmental Services was 15, 20 years ago. They'll be raising rates at a rate that will drive you all nuts, and they will be constraining the operational budget at the same time. So I know, I see you shaking your head. I mean, you should be talking to City Council about this issue. And all that stuff I mentioned earlier about the general fund and sheltering, and there is nowhere I could look from the chair I sat in at city government and not see a fiscal problem. The one I've just described is a utility problem. You all know that the Transportation Bureau is slowly going out of business because they have a broken broken revenue structure. If you look at permitting and development, they live entirely off permits, which means if you don't see cranes, they're going out of business. Because it's the big projects that subsidize mom and pop when they want to add a room on the house or remodel their small business. It's those tall buildings that make up for the others. So if you don't see cranes, they're in trouble. So again, PP&D, utilities, transportation, and the general fund. That's it, folks. And they're all in fiscal stress.
Mark Linehan, I am a City Club member. My question for you is, what have you done and what should your successor do from the administrative side to help with the relationship with the City Council?
Great question. I had put together a group, about 3 months ago, actually mandated by City Council in the budget process. They had a budget note that said we needed to get together, the mayor, the administration, and council, about constructing a process. Remember I talked about rules at the state legislature? A process by which we could construct rules that we would all hold each other accountable to. That has been a very frustrating discussion to this point. I'm no longer involved in it, but there are staffs from each of those branches that are working on trying to put a process together to take, let's just say, a councilor's good idea and turn it into legislation that the council could actually deliberate on and know what would happen if they voted yes or no, including how it would be implemented after it passed. How much it would cost, how many people it would take, is there legal risk, all those questions. We currently do not have a process that everybody accepts as a way to go from idea to legislation to implementation. And that would be the thing that I think I was trying to get with council. I think Raymond will continue that.
I think we've got time for one very brief question.
Hi, Sid Davis, City Club member. It's pretty common for politicians to come in with big ideas, but they don't understand how policy and procedure works. And it's very hard on the staff under them to make their agenda work in practice. Have you thought about the pipeline for how we form and shape our politicians in society to better prepare them to understand policy and procedure?
I don't think that qualifies as a short question, but go for it.
No, it doesn't. I have been quoted as saying that there is a clinical malady that affects newly elected officials, and it is a form of psychosis. And if you think about how they get there, they usually start by doing something in their neighborhood, and they do it really well, and they're effective at City Hall, and they actually make something happen or keep something from happening. And all their friends go, my God, you are great at that. You should run for City Council. And so eventually they hear that enough, and they do. And they go all through their district or across the whole city, and they knock on doors, and believe it or not, you may not believe this, but I ran for office in 2 different venues, and when you knock on somebody's door and saying, I'm so-and-so and I'm running for City Council, almost universally people will smile and they'll say, thank you for running. Almost universally. They may disagree with who you are and what you think and all of that, but when you leave the door, they'll almost always say, thank you for running, because they know how hard it is. So it's a really pretty decent experience when you think about it. except for the dialing for dollars part. And then you get elected, right? And it's election night, and you hold a big party, and all your friends show up. And if it's a big deal like Portland City Council, you may actually have the electronic media show up at your house if you win. And you're on TV, and it's just the major thing. And then from November to January, you go to parties through the holiday season, and everyone comes up and tells you how great you are and how you're going to change the world, and oh my God, you're just amazing. I can't wait to see what you do. And then you show up in January at your first meeting, and there are these waves of people who come up from the staff, and it's evident within like 10 minutes that they know everything and you know nothing. And have you ever been in an aberrant kind of relationship that's imbalanced and you feel like you're on the short end of what's important? You start to act out. And you get counselors who begin to spell staff with a PH. It's an infection to be eradicated. And this doesn't happen to everybody, but you can watch it happen, and it becomes a real challenge for the staff and the elected relationship for newly elected officials, and it can be really hard. And nobody's really to blame. It's just that the way we bring new electeds into their job almost sets them up for this. And so getting over it can be really challenging when they first start. Thank you all very much. I've gone on too long.
John, do you have any closing remarks?
I do, thank you. That was a lot. Are you feeling more confident or more anxious than when you walked in the door? Thank you to Mike Jordan and Sophie Peel. If I could get your attention just for a moment, please. Let me see if I can just get your attention for some closing remarks here. Can I do that? Thank you very much for joining us today. And thanks to Mike Jordan and Sophie Peel for helping us understand the new Portland City Administrator role and the complex issues that he faced daily. We congratulate Mike for an amazing career, and thank you for your many years of public service. If you are not a City Club member, and some of you aren't, but you now see the value that City Club can bring to our community, consider joining City Club. You can learn more about events, membership, and research at our website, pdxcityclub.org. You can also use the QR code out in the hallway at the registration desk to join today. And if you do, use the code NEW40, that's capital N, capital E, capital W, 40, and you'll have $40 off of a new membership fee. I want to thank our sponsors again, AARP Oregon and the Don Sterling Fund of the Oregon Community Foundation. And please be sure and join us on Monday, January 26th for our legislative recap at the Alberta Rose Theater. And in closing the remarks today, I just want to say, go Ducks.